It's time for Fresh Oil with singer-songwriter and pastor Keith Manley. A program designed to minister the gospel of God's grace and to bring fresh oil to the brokenhearted. And now, with today's program, Pastor Keith Manley.
Welcome to Fresh Oil. I'm so glad you joined me for the program. This week we're in our series, Generational Faith, Passing the Baton Well. And yesterday we sat with two women named Lois and Eunice, Timothy's grandmother and mother. And we talked about how genuine, lasting faith in the next generation almost always traces back to ordinary, faithful, mostly unnoticed people who just kept planting and watering day after day, often without any guarantee of how the harvest would turn out. Today I want to take you to what I think is the most practical, most applicable passage in the entire Bible for parents and grandparents. And it's not in the New Testament. It's tucked right in the middle of the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6. And it's been sitting there for over 3,000 years, waiting for us to slow down and actually read it the way it was meant to be read. Now, before we get into the passage itself, I want to give you just a little bit of context because I think it makes the passage land harder when you understand the moment in which it was spoken. Moses is old. He knows he's not going to make it into the promised land. He knows his time is short, and he knows that the people standing in front of him, most of whom were either children or not yet born when Israel left Egypt, are about to walk into a land that is going to challenge everything they believe about God. Canaan was not a spiritual neutral zone. It was full of other religions, other gods, other ways of living, other value systems that were going to pull on their children and their grandchildren for generations. Moses knows this. And so he stands before all of Israel and essentially delivers his final charge, a series of sermons in Deuteronomy that are really a last will and testament for a nation about to start a new chapter. And right in the middle of all of that is Deuteronomy 6, which contains what Jesus himself later called the greatest commandment of all. Here's how it opens. Verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. That's the Shema, the central declaration of Jewish faith that devout Jewish families recited every single morning and every single evening, every day of their lives. It's not a complicated theological statement. It's a daily, repeated, out loud declaration of who God is and what your relationship to Him is supposed to be. The Lord is one. You love Him with everything you have. That's the foundation everything else is built on. And then, immediately after giving this great commandment, Moses pivots directly to the subject of children. I don't think that's accidental at all. I think Moses is saying, essentially, this is the first thing and the most important thing. And the first thing you do with the most important thing is make absolutely certain it gets into the next generation. Verse 6, and these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. Start there. It has to be in you first. You can't pass on something you don't actually own yourself. Then verse 7, you shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. Now, I want to unpack verse 7 specifically, because I think there's more in it than most of us notice on a quick read. Moses lists 4 settings for when this teaching is supposed to happen. When you sit in your house, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you rise up. Not one of those is a formal, scheduled, sit down at the table with the workbook open kind of moment. Every single one of them is the incidental, unplanned, built into the day kind of moment. Moses isn't describing a curriculum. He's describing a lifestyle. When you sit in your house, that's mealtime, that's after school, that's the living room with the TV off and everybody actually present. When you walk along the road, in our world, that's the car, the 15-minute drive to school or practice, the windshield time, the music turned down, and actually talking time. When you lie down, that's bedtime, the last conversation of the day, the one that goes with the child into their sleep. When you rise up, that's morning, the tone you set before everything else starts pulling at everybody's attention. Moses is saying faith formation isn't something you schedule on Sunday morning and put away for the rest of the week. It's something that runs through the entire fabric of the ordinary day, woven into the moments you're already living anyway. I have to be honest with you about something, because I think it's important. We have largely outsourced the spiritual formation of our children to the church. And I want to be careful here, because I love the church, I've given my life to the church, and the church absolutely plays a vital role in the faith lives of children. But the average child in church gets maybe 1 to 2 hours a week of intentional spiritual input from a church setting. That sounds like a lot until you realize that in that same week, that child is getting 50 to 60 hours of input from a culture that does not share our values, does not love our God, and is not remotely neutral about what it wants to teach the next generation. 1 to 2 hours of church cannot compete with 50 to 60 hours of world, not without parents and grandparents doing their part in the spaces Moses is describing here. The home has to be the primary place of faith formation. The church comes alongside and supports it, but the home is where it has to live day by day in the ordinary moments. Now, I want to say something that I think is really important, because I don't want anybody listening to feel crushed under the weight of this. When Moses says, "teach them diligently," that phrase in the original Hebrew carries the idea of sharpening, like sharpening a blade, something getting more precise, more refined through repeated contact over time. Not a single grinding session that produces a perfectly sharp edge all at once, but steady, repeated, patient work, little by little, until the edge is formed. That's the picture for raising children in faith. It's not about being perfect. It's not about a family devotional time every night that looks like something out of a Christian magazine. It's about steady, patient, repeated contact with truth, woven into the moments you're already in together. Let me tell you what this can actually look like in the real world. It can look like driving your kid to school and asking one simple question: what do you think God is like? And then actually listening. It can look like saying at dinner, "Something happened today that reminded me God is faithful, and I wanted to tell you about it." It can look like lying down with a young child at bedtime and saying, "You know what? God made you on purpose, and He loves you, and nothing about that is ever going to change." It can look like a grandparent who calls or texts and says, "I was praying for you today, and this verse came to my heart for you." None of these are complicated. They don't cost any extra time. They happen in the moments you're already living. I want to go back to that first part of verse 6, because I think we skip past it too fast. These words which I command you today shall be in your heart, not just in your head, not just in your church attendance record, in your heart. That's a lived faith. A faith your children and grandchildren can see operating in you from the inside out, not just a faith you perform on Sunday morning when everybody's watching. Let me be real with you. Children are the most sophisticated detectors of hypocrisy in the world. They know the difference between a faith that's real and a faith that's a costume their parents put on once a week. The faith that sticks, the faith that actually transfers to the next generation, is almost always the faith that was real. The faith that was lived out loud in the kitchen on a Wednesday morning, not just in the pew on Sunday. I've watched this so many times over 4 decades of pastoring families. The children who grow up and keep their faith almost always describe a parent or grandparent whose faith they watched working in real life. They remember watching their mom or dad pray, really pray, when something was hard. They remember a grandparent who read the Bible not because somebody told them to, but because they clearly loved it. They remember a parent who messed up, genuinely messed up, and then talked openly about asking God for forgiveness instead of pretending it never happened. That kind of faith, honest, real, seen in its working clothes, that's the faith Moses is talking about when he says these words, shall be in your heart. And that kind of faith, lived out in front of children day after day, has a remarkable way of finding its way into their hearts too. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, because every time I teach this, somebody thinks it, but not everyone says it. What if I don't know enough Bible to teach it to my kids? What if my own faith feels shaky right now? Here's what I want to say to that. You don't have to be a seminary graduate to talk about God with your children. You don't have to have every question answered. Some of the most powerful conversations you'll ever have with your child about faith are the honest ones. I don't know the answer to that, but let's find out together. I'm struggling with trusting God about this right now, but I'm choosing to trust Him anyway. Those conversations aren't admissions of weakness. Those conversations are faith being lived out in real time, right in front of a watching child. That's exactly what Moses is describing. I want to close today with this. Moses ends this section in verse 9 with these words, "You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates." In Jewish tradition, this became the mezuzah, a small case containing the words of the Shema, fixed to the doorpost of the home, so that every time a person walked in or out, they passed a physical, tangible reminder that this house was a house where God was the center. Not a perfect house, not a house where everything was always going right, but a house where faith was visibly, consistently present at the very threshold of ordinary life. What would it look like for your home to be that kind of home, where faith isn't reserved for Sunday morning, but runs through the car rides and the dinner table and the bedtime conversations and the mornings before the day gets loud? That's the home Moses is describing. And it's the kind of home where the next generation has the best possible chance of growing up with faith that is genuinely, deeply their own.
Thanks for joining us today for Fresh Oil with Pastor Keith Manley. Fresh Oil is an outreach of Grace Family Church in Rockford, Illinois, and can be heard each weekday at this same time. You can reach us online at weneedgod.com. Until next time, remember, God's love for you is unconditional, and He makes His mercies new every morning.